beautiful people, and welcome to the About That podcast with me, your host, your favorite geek psychologist, your favorite pop culture enthusiast, your favorite queen of the nerds, Dr. Vanessa Hintz. And welcome back, friends, to all of you who are tuning in to hear part two of my discussion with my dear friend, Dr. Lauren Chapple-Love, about the 2023 phenomenal masterpiece, The Little Mermaid. And so our first conversation focused very much so on our reactions to the film, our blurred millennial reactions to the film. And this conversation is going to sort of take all of that and really focus on the value of representation, of Ariel, of a whole bunch of things. We're going to talk about representation. We're going to talk about why some people may have found it difficult to accept or embrace this reimagining of this Disney classic. And so, without further ado, please, my friends, enjoy. Absolutely, absolutely. And so to that point, and I appreciate what again you're giving voice to, because I do think that, that is the reason that, I do this podcast. This is the reason that I want to have these conversations, is because I think what you're bringing to the forefront are perspectives that people, whether they not be academics, whether they not be people of color, whether they not, women, whatever, may not have taken into account. And it's interesting because, and y'all have heard me say this before, like my mom is a white woman, and I don't think she understood how serious this movie was for me, right? Like I've seen it twice. I want to go see it again. And I keep telling her, like, you gonna go with me to see this movie. And I think again, it's just for her, one, like she wasn't in 1989, she wasn't up here watching The Little Mermaid. And two, I don't think it means the same to her to see Halle in that role. And so with that said, what would you say about the value of the representation of not only a Black Ariel, but a Black Ariel with locks, a Black Ariel with a multiracial family? What would you say
Black
about the value of
queen?
that representation?
Yeah, I mean, the list goes on, right? A black queen, other black characters within the island and the town itself. So things we know about representation. It is something that can go either way. It can either help our sense of racial trauma, mitigate it, make it feel a little bit better, soften the blow, or it can worsen things that are already extant or create new issues that we didn't know were there, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the representation I think that I see people online responding to, and the representation that I felt was generally positive about being able to see. I mean, I'm out here at this like big grown age now, but being able to see a mermaid that looked like me would have been really powerful in a positive way. Being
Mm-hmm.
able to see her sing and mess up and do kid things like explore like shark infested waters and do stuff that your parents just don't understand, all the normative kid stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is hugely powerful. I look forward to hearing how this newer generation is going to grow as a result of having these examples where it's, like I said, normative for them to be like, oh yeah, I can go to the store and buy a doll that looks like me and it's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Back when I was growing up, we had like I've been nerdy for a long time now here. So I used to get American Girl stories.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
my jam, my Jimmy Jam.
Yes.
And if you're not familiar, these stories of like these young protagonists, they all identified as girls. Some of them, like the redheaded one, was like, different time periods, maybe World War One or the 1800s or the 1950s, what have you. One of them's a scientist, one of them's, really into reading, one of them's this, that, or the third.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the American Girl doll that looked like me. That was Maddie. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Maddie, if you're not familiar with her storyline, was in the mid 1850s. You already know where I'm going to say and where I'm
Yep.
going with this.
Yep. Sure
So
do.
imagine the representation. playing with my little Maddie doll, and you could read the Maddie books. Her storyline was her mother and father were separated, they were enslaved people. It was a legal act for Maddie to learn how to read, and all these other stories and hijinks and whatever that her pals get into were ensconced within this historical context, like the other little homegirls, the other American dolls,
Mm-hmm.
American Girl dolls, but Maddie's was ensconced in what I now recognize to be historical trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Representation in that way, just because you can add a Black character, now ensconcing it in the historical trauma of slavery period,
Mm-hmm.
did not help. One of the things I can actively remember role playing with these dolls, as kids are often to do, is playing runaway slave.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
that sounds absurd when I say that,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes representation without context of historical data and trauma hurts worse than just seeing yourself up on a shelf. So
Mm-hmm.
I use that big long story to give an example to. I love that kids can see themselves, and I hope that kids are also having conversations about you do have the right to have a voice. It is one of the more beneficial things that a set of parents or caretakers or trusted adults can do for a kiddo is to listen to their voice and help them learn about how to have it. There's a lot of like nuance in that Little Mermaid story, right? About losing her voice, nobody was listening, now she's got it again. And I also hope that they're having conversations about how it's okay to ask your sisters for help
Mm-hmm.
or advice or to lean upon other people. So I
Mm-hmm.
love the representation. I just hope it also comes with context that makes sense for maybe the little girl that sees herself in that mermaid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She said, "Won't he do it?"
Listen, listen, won't he will. And I feel like what you're describing is, and again, it's something that shameless plug. We talked about in the Stranger Things book, but part of it is what I refer to in that chapter as symbolic inclusion. Again, I'm just having a person of color just to say, I'm just having, a trans person just to say I did. You know what I'm saying? Like you're saying without the
Mhm.
context. And I think what I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on, because I think sometimes what people struggle with is you can have a character with a marginalized identity that doesn't have to be rooted in the trauma of that identity.
Mm.
And you also don't have to explain why a Black person would be a mermaid, or you don't have to explain why there could be a gay superhero. Like they could just be a gay superhero, but we're also not going to negate the fact that they are going to have a different experience than a non-gay superhero. And so I think that is something that I feel like people, like creatives, I wonder how they balance. Like we want to provide accurate, responsible, conscious context. We also don't want to make it like we learn as therapists, right? If someone has a marginalized identity, don't make that the problem when they come into therapy. Like, oh, you're
A
you're
million
trans.
percent
That's the
no.
problem. Like, no, that's
Mhm.
not what we're trying to do. And so, how based on, like when you think about that for creatives, and even you can use this movie as an example, how would you say that they did or should or ought to, walk that line between context and not tokenizing, basically?
Yeah, y'all can't see because I'm vigorously shaking my head yes, because this, pro tip, the best piece of clinical advice I've ever gotten came from a professor in my master's program who said something along the lines of just because a person holds XYZ identity does not mean that that is why they're in your therapy office.
Blue?
And I love that perspective because I think that we as human beings, we like to categorize people and things. It makes me feel more comfortable. I recognize this is a cup because it's a cylinder with one end open and I can hold some type of liquid in it. Like that makes me feel better to be able to categorize it. We, however, as human beings are far more complex. And so I try and talk about these concepts of like biases and stereotypes and all these other psychological things that we recognize make it harder for us to see our own implicit biases. Okay. I see that when we talk about these things, to be able to recognize that I get to see Ariel as a constellation. She is a rambunctious youth. She's precocious. She is, a smart aleck. She's really curious. She's all these things. Maybe she'd be like a paleontologist, mermaid, or something. Who knows where this would have gone? But this concept that like, oh yeah, and then we can just kind of place her in a checkbox. She can be black, or she can be AAPI, or she can be this, that, or the third, and then we don't talk about it. I think that that does a disservice. I think it serves, frankly, as a microaggression that we call something we call a micro invalidation.
Mm-hmm.
That's effectively saying, oh, we're colorblind,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't see race. And we know as psychologists that these concepts of things like microaggressions, microinvalidation specifically, that's what I think is happening. I think people, creatives, maybe are kind of worried and scared. Oh well, I guess we have to check these boxes. We have to have a non-binary character. We have to have a member of the whatever the Super Seven. One of them has to be Asian and one of them has to be gay. Otherwise, people are gonna say that we're not being inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
You can have multiple identities and also pay homage to the fact that that character, in and of the fact that they hold one or more social identities that are marginalized, they can exist through that lens that is not always trauma. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
see a lot in comics, right? So they'll take a look. I'm just making this up. The Super Seven. You'll take a look at them, and they'll go to the character that's gay, and they'll be like, "Let's do a special one-off episode about homophobia." It's like, well, why don't we do an episode about how hard in general it is to be married? Like,
Exactly.
I
Woo.
love it. I love it, right? I love my marriage, but also like you have to decide what you want for dinner every day. It's exhausting.
Every day. What do
Every
you want? It's the same choices as yesterday. What do
uh,
you want? Yes.
you know where we live, babe. Like you know what's around us. Or we can go to the grocery store. What do we do? Like it's every day I'm gonna have this conversation. Yes, I look
Yes.
forward to it. That's my best friend. But this concept of like you don't always have to include representation of a marginalized community through trauma.
Mm.
I do not think that creatives or executives at whatever, streaming facility have gotten this yet. I can go on, insert streaming, platform here and go to like the Juneteenth category. And it's stuff like 12 Years a Slave,
Mhm.
Roots, the show Them, like trauma, trauma, trauma.
Mhm.
And it really doesn't have to be. I think the resistance can look like stories about rest, stories about Black joy, all of those other things.
Mhm. Woo. Okay. One thing I'm gonna say, I'm just gonna take a pause for the cause to appreciate what you just said, and I think also just appreciate your fellowship in the Black nerd space because I have definitely been told by people who are sort of auxiliary to this space. I remember being told by someone I very much respect and a mentor of mine, you give Black women, Black girls permission to feel joy in the joy that you feel in these nerdy spaces. And I think that that is something that I think for people from privileged identities don't necessarily understand that joy is a privilege at times, right? Because again, when your existence and when your identity is rooted and wrapped up in trauma, which again, we're not negating. We're just saying that it is complex and we are holistic. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that I appreciate what you're saying because, again, I think just from a personal experience, it has been both a gift and a curse being in these nerdy spaces, right? Because I think that you do hear a lot of, well, if Ariel's Black or whatever, all kinds of wild stuff. And ain't nobody gonna feel the same joy that I feel when I cosplay as Ariel. You know what I'm saying? Because it's gonna be something that's very, it's gonna be different. And so, I think that joy and that again, I just want to underscore what you said about marginalized identities. Again, there's a whole range of things that we can do with that, but I think that I almost feel like this appropriation of being woke means that you have to focus on the trauma of that, and I don't. I don't get it. I get it, but I don't like it. I don't like it.
I think if I'm outside of a group, one of the first things I see about the group tends to be the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a person, I don't identify as indigenous, for example. If I didn't know indigenous people, if I didn't listen, like shut my mouth and listen, which y'all are already learning is difficult for me, right? If I didn't shut my mouth and listen in indigenous spaces, if I didn't read indigenous authors and do my job, I get no brownie points for this. Like do my job as a person who's trying to be supportive of this community, it would be very easy for me to only see the traumatic pieces, missing and murdered indigenous women and this and this. And you miss the context, you miss the joy when you're on the outside looking into a space. And I wonder if that is maybe where a lot of creative folks are falling in. No one person can identify with everything, right? It's a red flag if I do, right? If I'm like, I'm everything according to 23andMe, red flag, right? But being able to recognize that on one hand, trauma informs. I'm a Black nerdy woman. I enjoy cosplay. I cosplayed as a number of different things. I'll bring one up. I've done Winter Soldier before, and I, as a Black woman, had to be mindful of the fact that I'm walking around, I don't know where it was, at this convention with a fake weapon or with a person that's got a mask on. This is pre-COVID, and it's like, why do you have a mask on?
Mhm.
So being able to recognize the context, I think, is the part that's missing, and that's where I think really good consultation comes in and putting your money where your mouth is. When I bring up one of the most radical things I can do as a business owner, is getting paid for my time and my
Mm,
expertise.
mm,
Okay. And
mm,
when they ask how much, I go, how much was the last white man that came through your organization paid? Because we'll start there.
mhm. Bloop.
So, I mean, this concept of I think creatives are going to have to start consulting, frankly, and going to actual spaces. And here we get into colorism, right? Like, are people more likely to hire me because I seem less this or less that? Like, it's also my job to acknowledge, like, hey, there are people who are in our field that are doing amazing things, and here's this and that. And it's about being uncomfortable. Most people don't like that.
Mhm,
We don't
mhm.
like that. I don't like feeling uncomfortable.
I do not. I do not. And I think to that point, we have seen how some people respond to this discomfort in the reactions that we've seen. And again, this film, The Little Mermaid, took 5 years to make. Like they announced this 5 years ago. They announced Halle, I feel like 5 years ago. And mind
And
you, we
people
had
were
COVID like
impressed.
in the middle of all of that. But this
Yep.
was like 5 years in the making. And from the very beginning, which first we had to Halle Bailey is not Halle Berry. That was the first thing we had to like get over. Like
I
my
was shook for a minute.
was like Halle Berry. I was like, no, sir, no, sir, no, sir. But again, we saw and continue to see the vitriol, the hatred, the racism, I would say, about this reimagining of the character. So, what would you say, not only just from a cultural standpoint, from a social psychology standpoint, from all the standpoints, right?
Yeah.
Why might it be difficult for people to really accept and embrace this reimagined Ariel?
The concept that comes initially to my mind is implicit bias. So psychology is annoying. Most of the fancy words that we use, you can break down into external versus internal. When you take a look at bias, we do the same thing. Explicit bias, that's me saying the quiet part out loud, right? So maybe I'm going up to a building and I've gone to Home Depot and I purchased some spray paint and I spray paint some slur word on there or a swastika or something awful like that. That's explicit bias. Implicit bias, I would argue, we see more frequently, and that's because implicit bias is an internal and unconscious belief that sometimes we're unaware of. Now, for people listening, you might be like, well, what am I supposed to even do with that? If it's unconscious, I don't know about it. How can I like even recognize that I've got them? By the way, we've all got them.
Fact.
And what can I do about it? So you see it come out. It might come out in something like a should statement. This is where I see on Twitter, on TikTok, on whatever your particular flavor of social media consumption is. That's where people are being like, well, no, 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 no. Ariel shouldn't be black.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm nosy because I'm a psychologist, and I'm like, so help me understand that, right? So what does that look like? So you're talking about a 2023 version of a 1989 really creative, amazing film that was based upon a white mermaid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, mind you, I went down like a total rabbit hole for this.
Yes.
Mind you, this is based off of a Dutch fairy tale.
Yes.
Already it's not real, and people are coming out with like logical arguments like, oh well, no, technically beings that live at the bottom of the sea as mermaids do, well actually shouldn't have the levels of melanin that would suggest blah blah blah. And I'm like, logical? Like, you see how hard we all make our implicit bias, like we get sweat on my brow trying to make these implicit biases work for us, right? And I'm like, no part of that film, any of the films, is logical. There are seven different sisters from the seven different seas. I went to public school. Please don't ask me all them seas. Um, but they're all different. Ariel's like rolling around, like I said, with like I think, I don't know if he was a snow crab. I feel like that's the crab legs I'll be seeing at the buffet, but I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but please feel free to go look that up. And like she's hanging around with like a crab who's got a Jamaican accent, but the people on the island have like English accents and European accents. Like, none of it makes sense.
Done.
Why are people so oppressed? I would argue people are so oppressed because they hold implicit biases, like internal ones that we can't see, that say this is what a mermaid should look like. This is what a doctor should look like. This is how a CEO should be dressed. And I think when you start to look at that
Mm-hmm.
and look at how your implicit biases impact other people, that's where it becomes very uncomfortable. This isn't like a regular type of training or something that you can do. It's not like how to clean up a spill on aisle 7. This is how can I best understand how I work, and
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, how can I best understand how the impact of my actions, which always matters more than intent behind them,
Mm-hmm.
impact over intent.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means that I'm the bad guy. I'm the drama. And
Mm-hmm.
that's hard for people to recognize. So I think there's a lot of things that make it difficult for us to see. Some of that is fragility. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exposed to this type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's uncomfortable and I tend to not want to do it. And I think that those concepts of fragility, implicit bias, and just rigidity, meaning I don't want to be moved. I don't want to see a new thing. I don't want a new way of life.
Mm-hmm.
All three of those concepts really play a trifecta into why sometimes it can be understandably hard for even well-intentioned people to be like, no, that's hashtag not my mermaid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think we're seeing that now. People are, you know, making all types of negative comments about the film, and it's fine if you don't like the film, like that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But going out of their way to try and ruin the film, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're seeing the exact opposite is perhaps going on. It's the film, you said the fifth most popular.
The fifth highest grossing remake of all time. And I'll say too, to what you said about implicit bias, because for those of you who have listened to any other episode, you've probably heard me say I have a hate relationship with the concept of implicit bias. And it is not because I don't understand it cognitively, and this is my bias, right? Like, let's just get
Yeah.
inception, like levels on levels on levels. I feel like the concept of implicit bias is often used to excuse harmful behavior, and I appreciate the way that you sort of couch that in the conversation about impact, because again, if you didn't intend to, it doesn't mean that it wasn't harmful, right? And so I think that for me, even when I'm talking to folks, whether it be students or training or whatever, about implicit bias, I try to raise that point and also just share that that's, from my perspective as a
Yeah.
Black woman. And you understand that the higher you get in academia, the higher you get in any profession, right? You see less and less people who look like you, and there are more and more calls for us to maintain the comfort of the people in power. And so implicit biases abound, right? Because we have to make sure that fragility is not at all threatened. And so the higher you get in academia, the higher you get in any climate or corporate ladder, whatever, there's going to be less and less people with marginalized identities, unfortunately. And I think that sometimes for me, like, I just want to like shake people who start talking about implicit bias, because I'm like, no, that doesn't mean that you could just be out here being janky. And I think that that's why I appreciate the way that you sort of outline that, because I do think that people who want to, we talked about this earlier, not sit in the discomfort, they're going to take implicit bias and run with it. Oh, I can't do anything about this. It's my bias. So leave me alone. I'm going to be okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I appreciate what you're referencing. And I absolutely think it is germane to what we're seeing not only with Ariel, but in many popular, like we about to have a Black Captain America, and people already losing they shit about this, even though we knew this was coming. But people are already like not having it.
I provide like gender affirming care in my practice, and one of the statements that comes out that I use a lot is that trans safety is always more important than cis comfort.
Ooh, ooh, that was
um,
tight.
and I think that that phrase is applicable, obviously, for gender identity and social, sexual orientation, gender expression conversations, but I think it's also applicable to our marginalized community conversations, specifically surrounding race and racial trauma, because being able to protect the comfort level of creatives or whomever it's just not going to be more important for me than being able to accurately and authentically reflect what we can show those kids that are coming to see that film, or those grown folks that are coming to see that film that perhaps need a corrective experience or just an hour, 52 minutes or whatever of relaxation.
Yes. And one thing that I value so much about this film is that I think for millennials, young people, I don't know, Z, ABC, whatever, all of these different generations, right? Like I think this film provides a point of departure for these types of conversations. And what I hope across the sort of lifespan, across the age spectrum, would be critical conversations, because I do think that part of what maintains that comfort and maintains that fragility is like, we're not going to push too much. Like, oh, we're starting to have this conversation about the Little Mermaid, but it's getting into race, and now we're going to stop. You know what I'm saying? I think that this movie, and many others, but I think this movie, particularly because of the nostalgic pieces of it and because of the sort of chronological sort of context of spanning these generations, I think that it provides, like, I can't wait to talk to my 9-year-old niece about the movie. You know what I'm saying? I can't wait to talk to her when she's older, like in a more critical way, but I'm excited to talk to her about what she thought about it. The same with the Super Mario Brothers movie. The reason that I loved it versus the reason that she loved it, I'm sure that those conversations are going to be absolutely amazing. And what it's not going to be about is me getting her to see my perspective or vice versa. And I think that that is sometimes what is missing, whether it be in these creative conversations or what have you, is we're not trying to get to the right. We're not trying to get to a place of agreement. We want to be in a place where we all feel safe. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes, or we all feel like our perspective is valid. And that is what I feel like is missing often. You know what I'm saying?
1,000,000%, or just the reality of the situation, like people being pressed about the Buzz Lightyear film, that there was a lesbian couple there. I'm like, different types of couples exist. It wasn't like a wokeness alarm, like ring the alarm like Beyonce. It was like different couples exist, and that's okay. The important part for that storyline was that they had a kiddo, and that kiddo grew up to be blah blah blah.
It's interesting that you say that too, because at the time of this recording, we're on the tail end of LGBTQ plus Pride Month, and my friend is my best friend in the whole wide world. Is a manager at a major retailer who has had a lot of issues with people, vandalizing Pride displays. And I remember being somewhere, and I don't remember who I was with, but they said something like representation is not indoctrination. And I think that that is also something that we are in the spaces in which you and I operate in doing DEI work. And that's a lot of what we're coming up against now, particularly in the political landscape, is that showing a lesbian couple in this film is indoctrinating children in this way or whatever. And I'm really trying to figure out when that became a commonly held belief. And I have that, maybe that's a conversation for a different day, but I think that even in seeing people talk about the Little Mermaid, right? Well, it's teaching young girls that they need to just leave home and run away with the man. And it's like, it's you know what I'm saying? And so I think that those it's interesting that those two things have become synonymous again, whether that's because of the political discourse or whatever, but that representation is equivalent to indoctrinating.
And that is I think the really not well thought out argument, but it's like people that exist within the identities know, like Xena Warrior Princess is making me gayer than the original Mummy, like Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. Like, why should I choose? Like,
That
no,
entire cast. Oh,
I'm absolutely. Who's that Egyptian guy? Like, come on now. I'm greedy, but I identify as greedy. There, I said it. So, but I mean, this concept that somehow seeing literally less than 30 seconds of a lesbian couple on the new Black Panther, or Buzz Lightyear or something like that is going to start shifting and swaying kiddos all of a sudden, impressionable kiddos, mind you. So not all representation is good representation. I shared my frustration with being able to turn on the TV and say, "Oh, yeah, we're celebrating Juneteenth. Here's 10 different stories of Black suffering. Have a great month."
mhm.
I believe, right, wrong, weak, or strong, I believe about 5 years from now, we're going to start seeing like Juneteenth sales and stuff like that. We already know larger corporations were getting in trouble last year or getting negative feedback, I should say. Nobody can really get a larger corporation in trouble, right? Because we don't have any power in that regard. But getting negative feedback about like Juneteenth ice cream, it's red velvet cake. Like we are doing, 0.0001% we're providing to this charitable organization that's really run through the same corporation. So it's like
Exactly.
all representation ain't good representation. In the same way, we might say all skin folk hate kin folk.
Mhm.
Um, and that being said, I think it's important for folks, especially folks who are bringing younger kiddos in to see films or into seeing, any of these other things I'm mentioning, bigger box stores or whatever. It's just important to have the conversations that people exist in the world, that minding my own beeswax is free 99, and
Mhm.
that's not necessarily a bad thing. And that
Mhm.
if there are questions about other people's identities, that you can address them in these really amazing ways. You and I both have awesome colleagues that talk about really hard topics, and give parents skills to work with their kids on stuff like sexual health and what does a dangerous person actually look like, and all these other things that I, as a millennial, grew up with like simpler versions like Stranger Danger, and now we know better. We teach kids different things surrounding that. It's not
Mhm.
so much Stranger Danger; it's adults who want to have secrets is
Mhm.
more of a dangerous thing. So I'm hopeful that we're on like some type of an upswing. Is it going to get there in my lifetime?
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
not that.
Mhm. Mhm. This has just been a delight. I am so excited about everything that was said, not only because of all this knowledge that we dropped, but again, because my hope is that for folks listening, you pick this up and take this and go forth and be great with these little nuggets that we've been dropping. And so, is there anything that you would like to say before we bring our conversation to a close?
Yeah, I think that mental health access is one of the things that gets me out of bed in the morning, and recognizing how hard that is. And if you're a person that's like, wow, I've never even thought of this kind of stuff, or I wish I could have conversations like this, with my therapist about how these things impact me, you can. That therapists that represent a number of different communities are out there, and that it's hard as hell to be able to find them sometimes, but that we're out there and we're out there for y'all. So yeah.
Mm, Mental health is wealth. Mental health is wealth. Um,
Yeah.
I will say, and I appreciate you saying that too, because again, part of my impetus for even starting this podcast was to sort of work to demystify and destigmatize not just mental health, but mental health for marginalized folks. Because again, I
Mhm.
think that I appreciate what you just said about how it is hard, and sometimes it takes some shopping around with therapists to find someone who you connect with, and that is absolutely your right to do so. And so I point blank period underscore what it is that you just said. And I just want to thank you again for being here in this conversation. I knew it was going to be fabulous, and it has exceeded my wildest dreams. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And let us know where we can find you on social media.
Yeah, so I'm going to be accountable that it's a individual growing edge that I have of posting all the awesome things that I do on social media. But if you'd like to look at some stuff and some stuff I did 3 months ago, yeah, for sure. My so I can be accountable for that. It's fine. My socials are at DrChapplelove. So at Dr. Chapple-Love, and I'm sure Dr. Pence over here will put something like that up that's a visual for people that are like, how do you spell that? That's a lot.
I sure enough will, because you sung it too, and I want to
Yeah.
put some of the letters up, some of the letters down, like DR. See, like I want to do
Who
it like
doesn't want that DrCA? Ooh, okay. I usually just say like CH Apple, like the fruit, because like Dave Chappelle just messed it up for all of us. But yeah.
oh.
Mhm, mhm.
That's gonna help me moving forward, because when I'm typing this out, I'm gonna be like, how do you spell it? And you just
CH
told
Apple,
me.
like the fruit.
You just gave me that. And so
Gotcha.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for your time today. We appreciate you. If you haven't seen The Little Mermaid,
Check
you
it
need to
out if you
go.
want.
You
Mhm.
best to hurry up. And when it come on Disney Plus, you can just watch it every day like I plan to. Until next time, people, I wish you and your families safety, joy, and health. Take care, beautiful people.
Bye.